During a massive argument, my partner shrieked. 100 other guys would beg for my attention. I can pack my bags right now. She waited for me to grovel. Instead, I simply replied, go ahead. Then I sat back and watched her reality completely shatter when she realized I was dead serious. We had been together for 4 years, and for the last 2, that exact threat had been the loaded gun she kept on the coffee table. Every time I set a boundary, every time I didn't fold to her exact specifications of how a weekend should go, the gun came out. It was a conditioning tactic. She knew I hated conflict. She knew I valued stability. Until that Thursday, it had always worked. I work as a freelance 3D animator. It's not a job where you punch a clock and leave it at the door. You live in wireframes and render queues. It requires long, unbroken blocks of intense focus. Outside of that, my life is incredibly simple. I hit the bouldering gym 3 times a week to keep my back from fusing into the shape of my Herman Miller chair, and I play board games with a few guys on Thursday night. That's it. I don't ask for much. My buddy Tyler Locke, another animator who operates in the same circles, had just forwarded me a massive freelance contract opportunity. It was for a medical tech startup that needed high-end fluid dynamics animated for a new surgical stent they were pitching to investors. The payout was insane. It was the kind of money that fundamentally changes the math of your year. It meant clearing my remaining student debt and having enough capital to finally rent a commercial studio space instead of working out of our second bedroom. The catch was the timeline. The pitch was locked for Monday morning at 9 a.m. Tyler sent me the files on a Wednesday. I told Isabella instantly, the second I got off the phone with him. We were standing in the kitchen. I looked her right in the eye and said, I'm going to be locked in my office all weekend. Do not expect me to exist. This is a game changer. She nodded. She said she understood. Thursday night, I was sitting in the dark glow of my monitors, running a preliminary rendering test on a blood flow simulation. The door swung open. Isabella marched in, holding her phone out, the screen glowing brightly with her calendar app. She held it like a weapon. We are going to Olivia's VIP yacht party on Saturday, she announced, her voice already carrying that sharp, unyielding edge. Then a hangover brunch at the Soho House on Sunday. You're coming. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the progress bar. I have the startup pitch. What pitch? I spun my chair around. The one I warned you about literally 48 hours ago. In the kitchen. The medical tech one. Her posture shifted into immediate hostility. The shift was always so fast it gave me whiplash. 1 second we were roommates. The next I was on trial. So, you're abandoning me to play with cartoons? That word. Cartoons. It was designed to inflict maximum disrespect, to reduce a highly technical, lucrative profession down to child's play because it didn't involve wearing a suit. Then, she unleashed her favorite trump card. She crossed her arms, tilted her head, and delivered the line she had used a dozen times before. You know, 100 other guys would beg for my attention. I can pack my bags right now. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the expectation in her eyes, the smug certainty that I was about to stand up, apologize, beg her not to be mad, and promise to buy her a new dress for Olivia's stupid boat party. I felt something snap. It wasn't loud. It was just a quiet, clean break somewhere in the back of my mind. I hit Ctrl+S on my keyboard. I saved my project file. Go ahead. I didn't scream. I wasn't even angry. It was just an objective statement of fact. Isabella froze. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a blank, buffering confusion. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. Normally, this was the part where I coddled her ego. This time, I reached over to my desk and grabbed my external hard drive, a heavy little metal brick holding my entire professional life, and shoved it into my backpack. Saturday was booked for work, I said, unplugging my keyboard. The yacht wasn't. She finally found her voice, though it was higher, thinner than before. I swear to God, Ryan, one day you'll wake up and realize you ruined the most valuable connection you have. I started wrapping up my power cables. Awesome. Make sure you leave your keys on the counter. I packed my entire desktop setup, monitor, tower, tablet, cables, and carried it out to the hallway. She stood in the doorway of the office, completely rigid, watching me. I didn't say another word. I loaded my gear into my car and drove straight to Tyler's apartment across town. Tyler had a spare desk in his living room. I set up my rig, put on my noise-canceling headphones, and went to work. That weekend was insanely productive. Without the constant, low-level anxiety of anticipating Isabella's moods, my brain fired on all cylinders. The fluid dynamic simulations baked perfectly. I barely slept, eating cold takeout and drinking terrible coffee, but I nailed the pitch by Sunday night. Whenever I took my headphones off to use the bathroom, I'd check my phone. It was flooded. Isabella had sent furious paragraph, long scrolling blocks of text detailing every flaw in my character, followed by passive-aggressive photos of her on the yacht with Olivia, followed by more text demanding to know where I was. I swiped them all away. I didn't block her, but I didn't read them either. Monday afternoon, after officially submitting the files to the startup and getting a confirmation receipt, I packed up my gear and drove back to our apartment. I unlocked the door. She was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of water, glaring at the door. Her bags were not packed. I set my monitor down on the dining table. I told her I landed the contract. I kept my voice neutral, professional. She tried the communication angle. She softened her voice, putting on her therapist tone, telling me that we needed to work on how I prioritize my time and how my outbursts made her feel unsafe. I just looked at her. I told her a decent girlfriend doesn't sabotage a massive career milestone for a boat ride. I told her that weaponizing our relationship every time she was inconvenienced wasn't communication. It was emotional extortion. For a month, we lived in a state of grinding, miserable attrition. She refused to move out. Instead, she escalated her tactics. She would casually leave her phone unlocked on the couch, the screen brightly displaying Instagram direct messages from some guy named Brandon. Brandon had a lot of opinions about how a real man should treat a woman. I just told her to go date Brandon. I didn't care. When the jealousy angle failed, she tried acting aggressively domesticated. I would wake up to the smell of expensive, single-origin coffee beans. She started baking pastries on Wednesday night. She would leave little notes on the counter. But the moment I mentioned my work schedule, the moment I told her I had to grind through the weekend to meet a milestone for the new tech client, the mask slipped. The threats returned. The bags were mentioned. The climax happened at her parents' anniversary dinner. It was a fancy downtown steakhouse, the kind of place with dim, amber lighting, heavy silver cutlery, and waiters who memorized the daily cat. We were sitting at a long table with her parents, her aunts and uncles, and her older brother, Stellan. Stellan was an investment banker who had always looked at me like I was something he stepped in. Halfway through the main course, Isabella had downed 3 glasses of Cabernet. She tapped her wine glass with her knife. The table quieted down. She looked right at me, her eyes wet with manufactured tears, and announced to the entire table, "It's just so hard being with someone who completely neglects you for a paycheck. I feel like a ghost in my own home." The table went dead silent. Her mother looked horrified. I didn't flinch. I carefully placed my fork down, picked up my heavy linen napkin, and wiped my mouth. "Normal partners," I said, my voice carrying clearly over the soft jazz playing in the restaurant. "Don't threaten to pack their bags every time they don't get their way." Stellan, who was sitting across from me cutting into a ribeye, paused then. To everyone's absolute shock, Stellan let out a harsh, barking laugh. He pointed his steak knife at Isabella. "He's got a point, Izzy," Stellan said, taking a sip of his scotch. "If you constantly tell a man you're going to leave, don't play the victim when he finally holds the door open for you." Isabella turned perfectly pale. She looked at her parents for backup, but they were staring at their plates, mortified by the public scene. She grabbed her coat from the back of the chair, marched out of the restaurant, and immediately texted me from the street. The text read, "I am officially moving in with Brandon. Don't even try to stop me." She was waiting for my frantic apology. She was waiting for me to run out into the street and beg. It never came. I stayed, finished my steak, paid my half of the bill, and politely wished her parents a happy anniversary. The next morning, while she was at Brandon's, I hired a moving company. I packed all of her belongings, every dress, every overpriced throw pillow, every bottle of perfume, into boxes. I paid the movers to drop them off at her sister's house in the suburbs. I texted her the address of where her things were, and then I changed the locks on the apartment. Life got incredibly quiet after that. The tech startup contract paid out exactly as promised. It was transformative. I upgraded my workstation to a dual GPU setup that cut my render times in half. I started climbing harder routes at the bouldering gym. I slept through the night. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely. It was medicinal. 8 months passed. I barely thought about her. I had just signed a lease on a commercial office space downtown. It was a small brick-walled studio with massive windows letting in natural light. It was mine. No more working out of a spare bedroom. I was there on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing a paint-splattered t-shirt, rolling a fresh coat of matte white paint onto the back wall. I heard the front glass door creak open. I turned around, wiping chalky dust off my hands with a rag. Isabella was standing in the doorway. She looked exhausted. The polished, high-maintenance gloss she usually carried was completely gone. She was wearing sweatpants and carrying a cheap paper coffee cup from a gas station. She looked around the empty studio, taking in the exposed brick and the expensive desk I had just assembled. I found out later from Olivia that Brandon had kicked her out after 2 months. She had lost her marketing job shortly after that due to attendance issues and had been bouncing around on friends' couches, drowning in the credit card debt she used to fund her lifestyle. "Ryan," she said, her voice small and trembling, "we really need to talk." I dropped the rag on the drop cloth. "You don't work here. There's nothing to discuss." She took a step forward. "I was so stupid. I see that now. I was taking you for granted. We can rebuild this. I know we can. I don't need a compromise," I said, my voice flat. "And I definitely don't need you." Her face crumpled. The desperation hardened back into that familiar, panic-driven manipulation. "Ryan, please, if you make me walk out that door right now, I am never coming back," she sobbed, playing her final, useless card. The same threat, just packaged in defeat. I didn't even look back at her. I picked up my roller. That was the whole point. She stood there for a few seconds, breathing heavily, waiting for a lifeline. I just kept painting. The door clicked shut. I dipped my roller back into the paint tray. The thick, wet sound of the paint was the only noise in the room. For exactly 45 seconds, the studio was perfectly silent. It was a good feeling. Then the back door of the studio opened. Tyler Locke walked in from the alley, where he had been taking a phone call. He was supposed to be helping me tape off the baseboard. His face was completely white. "Dude," Tyler said quietly, holding his phone out in front of him, "you need to see this right now." I put the roller down. "What is it?" He walked over and turned the screen toward me. It was Instagram. It was Isabella's account. The post was 12 minutes old, meaning she had posted it standing on the sidewalk right outside my window before she even walked in. It was a photo of the front of my new studio building. The address numbers above the door were clearly visible. The caption read, "Starting over looks good on some people. Karma finds everyone eventually." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Tyler, it's just her being dramatic. She just came in here and tried to beg for her spot back. Let her post her vague quotes." "No, Ryan, look at the tag." Tyler tapped the photo. A small black tag popped up over the door of my studio. She had tagged an account I didn't recognize. I took the phone from his hand and clicked the profile. It was a private account. No grid posts, but it had a profile picture, created 3 weeks ago. 300 followers already, which meant it was being heavily circulated in a specific network. The name on the account was Jasper Trask. My stomach dropped. The cold, damp smell of the fresh paint suddenly felt suffocating. The bio on the account read, "I know what Ryan Calloway did in 2019, and I have proof." "Why is Jasper Trask tagging your new studio address?" Tyler asked, his voice tight. He knew the name. Anyone who was in our tight-knit freelance circle in 2019 knew the name. "Isabella," I said, my throat suddenly dry. "She found him. How the hell would she even know to look for him? You guys never talked about that." "She didn't need me to talk about it," I muttered, handing the phone back. "She lived with me. She had access to my old hard drive, the ones I kept in the desk drawer, the old email backups. In 2019, before I had my own client base, I partnered with Jasper Trask. We were supposed to be a dual-threat team. He handled the rigging, I handled the lighting and rendering. We landed a massive contract with an indie game studio. Halfway through the project, Jasper had a complete mental breakdown. He stopped responding to emails. He stopped doing the work. The studio was threatening to sue us both for breach of contract. I was going to lose my apartment. So, I made a choice. I locked Jasper out of the shared cloud drive. I stayed awake for 8 days straight, doing his job and my job. I finished the project, delivered the assets, and I invoiced the studio entirely under my own LLC. I took all the money. I had to survive. But I also took all the credit. When Jasper finally surfaced 2 months later, looking for his cut, I told him there was no cut. I told him he abandoned the project, and I had the client formally blacklist him so he couldn't retaliate. I effectively exiled him from the local industry to protect my own reputation. It wasn't illegal, but it was brutal. It was the kind of ruthless, bridge-burning move that permanently destroys trust if the story gets out. "Ryan," Tyler said, scrolling down on his phone. The color hadn't returned to his face, except my follow request to this account. Now, I pulled my phone out of my pocket with paint-stained fingers. I opened my app, found the account, and sent a request. It was approved instantly. Someone was sitting there watching the screen, waiting for me. The grid loaded. It wasn't just a vague threat. The account had 3 posts. The first was a screenshot of an email from 2019. It was my email to the indie game studio, where I explicitly told them Jasper was dealing with substance abuse issues, a lie I invented to explain his absence and secure the contract for myself. The second post was a PDF of the final invoice, showing the $45,000 payout routed directly to my personal checking account, completely bypassing the joint LLC we had formed. The third post was a screenshot of a fresh DM. I zoomed in on it. My chest tightened so hard it physically hurt. It was a message sent from Jasper's account, directly to the lead project manager at the medical tech startup, the massive client I had just secured, the client funding this very studio. The message read, "Before you wire the second milestone payment to Ryan Calloway, you should look at these documents. Ask him how he handles his business partners when he thinks nobody is watching." Tyler looked up from his phone, staring at me. "Tell me the startup hasn't seen this yet." My phone buzzed in my hand. An incoming email. The sender was the medical tech startup's legal department. The subject line was simply, "Urgent, contract suspension, and inquiry." I tapped the notification. The email opened against the bright white background of my phone, the glare suddenly harsh in the dimming afternoon light of the studio. It was from a guy named Emerson in the startup's compliance division. I had never spoken to Emerson. I usually dealt directly with the creative lead. The text was short, dense with corporate legalese, effective immediately, pending investigation into allegations of professional misconduct and misrepresentation. All milestone payments are frozen. They were citing a standard vendor morality and ethics clause I had signed without reading. At the bottom, they requested a mandatory Zoom call for 9:100 a.m. the following morning to discuss the materials provided by a third party. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I didn't know what to type. It's a lie? It wasn't a lie. I did it. I sent that email in 2019. I fabricated a drug problem to destroy a man's career so I could keep a check. Tyler was still standing there, holding his phone. He looked from my face down to my hand. "They froze it, didn't they?" Tyler asked. His voice wasn't sympathetic anymore. It was careful. "Just a suspension," I said, trying to keep my tone level. "Just until they clear this up." "Clear what up, Ryan?" Tyler stepped back, putting some physical distance between us. "Did you actually send an email telling a client Jasper was on drugs?" I looked at the fresh white paint on the wall. "He vanished, Tyler. He left me holding the bag on a 50 grand project. I was going to get sued. So you nuked his reputation with a lie?" "I did what I had to do to survive." Tyler shook his head slowly. He slipped his phone into his pocket. Tyler was a good guy, but he was also a pragmatist. In the freelance world, your network is your net worth. You don't associate with a sinking ship, especially one that goes down for ethical breaches. If the medical tech startup dropped me, word would get out. The industry in this city is too small. "I was supposed to tape the baseboards," Tyler said, looking at the floor. "I think I'm gonna go." "Tyler, come on. It's Isabella. She's just trying to extort me because her life fell apart." "It doesn't matter who pulled the trigger if the gun is real, man," Tyler said. He didn't sound angry. He just sounded tired. "I can't be collateral damage in your revenge plot with your crazy ex. I have my own clients to think about." He walked out the back door. I listened to his footsteps fade down the alley. I was alone in the studio. I sat down on a plastic paint bucket. I opened my banking app. The balance was $4,200. I had just wired the first milestone payment, 30 grand, to the commercial landlord for the first, last, and security deposit on this space. I had dropped another 12 grand on the new dual GPU rendering station. My credit cards were maxed from buying office furniture and paying for the move. I was operating on razor-thin margin, entirely dependent on the second milestone payment hitting my account by Friday. If they canceled the contract, I was bankrupt. I would default on the lease by the end of the month. I opened my text messages. I typed out Isabella's number from memory since I had deleted her contact. "What do you want?" I sent it. 3 minutes later, a read receipt appeared. She didn't reply. Instead, my phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Not her. Me. A second text followed immediately. "You cost me $22,500 in 2019, plus 7 years of blacklisted income. I've retained a lawyer for the defamation suit, but I'd rather settle this quietly. $100,000, wired by Friday." It was Jasper. Isabella hadn't just posted the documents online. She had actually tracked him down and handed him the loaded gun. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew I had just signed the biggest contract of my life. She waited until I was fully leveraged, completely exposed, and then she struck the match. I typed back, "I don't have 100 grand. The client just froze my payments because of your DM." The reply came instantly. "Then, you better find a loan, Ryan, or tomorrow at 9 a.m. I send the medical startup the rest of the emails." I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor of my empty apartment, staring at the wall. I ran every possible calculation, every potential exit strategy. There was no way out. The proof was ironclad. I had sent those emails from my own IP address. I had signed the invoices. If Jasper sued me for defamation and tortious interference, the discovery process alone would bankrupt me in legal fees, even if I somehow managed to drag it out. At 8:55 a.m., I put on a clean button-down shirt. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and clicked the Zoom link Emerson had sent. The meeting room opened. There were 3 people on the screen. Emerson, looking exactly like a compliance officer in a gray suit. A woman named Coralie, the lead project manager I had been working with for weeks. And a third man, older, sitting in a glass-walled office. His screen name read, Thad Hensley, General Counsel. "Ryan," Coralie said. Her voice was completely devoid of the warmth we had shared over the last few weeks of late-night rendering revision. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "Thank you for joining." "Morning," I said. My throat was incredibly dry. Thad Hensley leaned forward. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Mr. Calloway, we received a direct communication yesterday from an individual named Jasper Trask. This communication included a PDF portfolio of emails and financial documents detailing a project you completed in 2019. Have you seen these documents?" "I'm aware of the allegations," I said, trying to use the corporate non-answers I had heard on television. "They aren't allegations," Thad said flatly. "They are your own emails. We ran the headers through our IT department. The screenshots haven't been altered. Did you or did you not falsely claim a former business partner was suffering from severe substance abuse in order to secure sole payment on a contract?" I looked at Coralie. She was staring at her webcam, her face a mask of supreme disappointment. "It was a complicated situation," I started. "He abandoned the project. Yes or no, Mr. Calloway?" Thad Thad interrupted. I swallowed hard. Yeah, silence stretched across the call. Emerson typed something on his keyboard, the clacking sound loud in the quiet. Ryan, Coralie finally said, sighing softly. We are in the middle of a Series B funding round. We are courting institutional investors. We are building medical technology that requires FDA approval and absolute ethical transparency. We cannot have a primary vendor on our books who has a documented history of fraud and defamation. It was 7 years ago, I pleaded, the panic finally cracking through my professional veneer. I was a kid. I was about to get evicted. The work I'm doing for you right now is flawless. You said so yourself on Friday. The work is excellent, Coralie agreed, but you are a liability. If Mr. Trask decides to take this public or sues you while you are actively contracted with us, our brand is caught in the crossfire. Thad took over. Pursuant to Section 4, Clause B of your vendor agreement, we are terminating your contract effective immediately for a breach of the morality and conduct stipulations. You will not receive the second or third milestone payments. You may keep the initial deposit for the work completed thus far. Emerson will forward the formal termination letter by the end of the hour. You can't do this, I said, my voice rising. I just signed a commercial lease based on this timeline. I bought equipment. I'm fully dedicated to this project. That was a poor financial decision, Thad said coldly. We expect you to delete all proprietary startup files from your local drives within 24 hours. Good luck, Mr. Calloway. The screen went black. The call ended. I sat staring at my own reflection in the dark monitor. My phone buzzed on the table next to the laptop. It was an incoming call. The caller ID said Stellan, Isabella's brother, the investment banker, the guy who had laughed at her at the steakhouse and told her not to play the victim. I stared at the name for a long time. Why the hell was Stellan calling me? I picked it up. Hello, Ryan. Stellan's voice came through, crisp and unbothered, sounding exactly like he did when ordering a $300 bottle of wine. I hear you're having a rather difficult morning. My grip on the phone tightened. How do you know that? Isabella has been texting the family group chat since 7 a.m. She's quite proud of herself, gloating about how she finally took you down. Stellan chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. She mentioned a guy named Jasper and a canceled contract with a medical startup. If you're calling to rub it in, Stellan, I really don't have the bandwidth. I'm not calling to rub it in, Stellan said. The background noise shifted. It sounded like he was walking down a busy city street, traffic humming behind his voice. I think my sister is a chaotic liability who ruins everything she touches. I thought it was hilarious when you kicked her out. I respect a man who protects his peace. I didn't say anything. I just breathed. But now, Stellan continued, she's involving herself in corporate sabotage. And from what I understand, this Jasper character is demanding $100,000 to keep quiet about a defamation suit. How do you know the exact number? Because Isabella is an idiot, Ryan. She forwarded me the screenshots of Jasper's texts to you. She thinks I'm going to congratulate her on her master plan. Instead, I'm looking at a textbook case of extortion. Stellan paused. I could hear him order a coffee from a barista in the background. Here's the reality, Ryan, Stellan said, his voice dropping an octave, returning to full business mode. Jasper doesn't want to sue you. A lawsuit takes 2 years and costs $50,000 in retainer fees. He just wants a quick payday. And Isabella wants to watch you bleed. But I don't like it when my sister plays amateur mafia. It's trashy. What are you offering, Stellan? I'll buy your debt. I'll pay Jasper the $100,000 today. He signs a bulletproof ENDA drafted by my firm's lawyers, legally binding him to silence, and he hands over the original hard drive or wherever he got those emails. Your problem vanishes. My heart hammered against my rib. A lifeline. An actual tangible lifeline dropped from the sky. Why? I asked. What do you get out of this? You owe me, Stellan said smoothly. $100,000 plus a 15% convenient fee. You're going to sign a promissory note. If you default, I take ownership of your LLC, all your rendering hardware, and the rights to your entire past portfolio. I closed my eyes. It was a shark loan. But it was a shark loan from a guy wearing a bespoke suit standing in a high-end coffee shop. And what about Isabella? I asked. Isabella doesn't get a dime. I'll handle my sister. I'll explain to her very clearly that if she ever speaks to Jasper again or posts another word about you on the internet, I will personally see to it that she is cut off from the family trust. Stellan took a sip of his coffee. You protect your business. I put my sister back in her box. We both win. I looked at the black screen of my laptop. I looked at the eviction notice forming in my mind. Draft the paperwork, I said. Smart man, Stellan replied. Check your email in 10 minutes. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. I had just traded one executioner for another. Jasper was a ghost from my past, angry and desperate. Stellan was entirely different. Stellan was cold capital. He didn't care about the morality of what I did in 2019. He only cared about leverage. And now, he had all of it. 20 minutes later, the email arrived. It wasn't from Stellan's personal account. It was from an encrypted legal service. The subject line read, promissory note and asset transfer agreement. I opened it and read through the terms. They were aggressive. Bi-weekly payments. If I missed a single payment by more than 24 hours, the default clauses triggered automatically. He would seize my business assets without requiring a court order. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a digital signature block waiting for me. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tyler. Hey man, thought about it. I'm sorry about the contract, but I'm blocking your number. Don't contact my clients. Good luck. I stared at Tyler's text. The isolation was suddenly absolute. I had no studio contract. I had no friends in the industry. I had an empty commercial space downtown smelling of wet paint and a $115,000 debt to an investment banker who viewed me as a high-yield distressed asset. I clicked the signature box on Stellan's contract. I typed my name. I hit submit. I had survived, at least for today. I packed up my laptop, grabbed my car keys, and drove back down to the new studio. The afternoon sun was baking the brick facade. I unlocked the glass door and stepped inside. The air was thick and warm. The white wall I had started painting yesterday looked pathetic. I walked over to the desk I had built. My dual monitor setup sat there, dark and quiet. I booted up the system. I needed to find freelance work. I needed small jobs, fast turnaround, architecture renders, indie game models, whatever I could get my hands on to make the first payment to Stellan by the end of the month. I opened my email client to start blasting out cold pitches to old contacts. There was a new unread message sitting at the top of my inbox. The sender was an email address I didn't recognize, just a string of random letters and numbers. The subject line was empty. I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just a single audio file attached. An MP3, 3 minutes long. I frowned. I checked the virus scanner. It came up clean. I plugged my studio headphones into the audio jack on the front of my tower. I put them over my ears. I double-clicked the file. There was a second of static. static, followed by the muffled sound of fabric rustling. A pocket recording. Then, a voice came through, clear, sharp, and unmistakably familiar. He's entirely exposed right now, Jasper, I made sure of it. It was Isabella's voice. I froze. I turned the volume up. He lost the startup contract this morning, Isabella continued, her voice echoing slightly, like she was sitting in a large, empty room. I had Stellan call him exactly 10 minutes after the Zoom meeting ended. Another voice answered. It wasn't Jasper. It was Stellan. He signed the note. Stellan's voice came through the headphones, sounding deeply amused. He actually signed it without requesting a single amendment. He handed over the rights to his entire portfolio and all his physical hardware. So we own him, Isabella said. I own him, Stellan corrected sharply. You just laid the bait. But yes, Izzy, he's locked in. We bleed him dry for the next 3 years, and when he inevitably misses a payment, I liquidate the LLC and sell his hardware. You'll get your cut to pay off your credit card. A third voice spoke up. A low, raspy voice I hadn't heard since 2019. Jasper Trask. Just make sure you wire my 20 grand by tonight, Stellan, Jasper said. I played my part. I sent the emails. I want out. The recording clicked off. The silence in my headphones was deafening. I took them off slowly, setting them down on the desk. There was no extortion plot from Jasper. There was no lucky rescue from Stellan. It was a coordinated trap. Isabella hadn't just gone to Jasper to ruin my life. She had gone to her brother. They had orchestrated the entire sequence of events. They weaponized my past, severed my income, and then swooped in to legally steal my company under the guise of saving me. And I had just signed the contract giving them the right to do it. My phone lit up on the desk. A calendar notification popped onto the screen. First payment to S-Trar, LLC due, 14 days. I looked around the empty studio, the freshly painted walls, the expensive desk, the hardware that I no longer technically owned. I was sitting inside a cage I had just locked from the inside. I didn't delete the audio file. I copied it to 3 different external drives and uploaded it to a secure cloud server. Then I looked at the sender's email address again. It was a Proton Mail account, completely anonymous, but it had to be Jasper. He was the only one in that room who stood to gain from me knowing the truth. Stellan and Isabella wanted me in the dark, quietly paying my debt. Jasper, on the other hand, was a creature of spite. He took Stellan's 20 grand, but he didn't like being a pawn. Sending me the recording was his final middle finger to the entire situation. I hit reply and typed a single line. What do you want for the original recording device? The email bounced back 3 seconds later. Address inactive. He had burned it the second the file was delivered. I sat in the sweltering heat of the studio. I didn't have the air conditioning turned on because I couldn't justify the utility bill. I had exactly 14 days to generate $4,200 for the first bi-weekly installment to Stellan, plus another $2,000 for my personal rent, groceries, and gas. I opened my browser and logged into every freelance marketplace I hadn't used since 2017. I lowered my hourly rate to $25. I took my entire high-end medical and fluid dynamics portfolio, the stuff that usually commanded $300 an hour, and buried it. Nobody on these sites wanted fluid dynamic. They wanted cheap, fast garbage. For the next 10 days, I didn't leave the studio. I slept on an air mattress I dragged in from the trunk of my car. I took a job animating a low-poly mascot for a local car dealership in Ohio. I did architectural fly-throughs for a sleazy real estate developer in Miami who wanted the lighting manipulated to hide the power lines next to his condo project. I modeled 30 different variations of a kitchen blender for an Amazon dropshipper. It was soul-crushing, mind-numbing labor. I worked 18-hour shifts, my eyes burning, my back aching from sitting in a cheap folding chair. The dual GPU setup whined and pushed hot air into the small room as I cranked out render after render. On day 11, I had scraped together exactly $4,500. It was barely enough for Stellan's payment, leaving me with $300 to live on. That afternoon, the front door of the studio opened. I was in the middle of texturing a granite countertop for the Miami developer. I didn't turn around. I thought it was the mail carrier. Ryan Calloway? A voice asked. It was a kid, maybe 23, wearing a slim-fit navy suit that looked like it cost more than my car. He was holding an iPad in one hand and a sheet of barcode stickers in the other. Who are you? I asked, taking off my headphones. Lachlan, he said. He didn't offer to shake my hand. I work for S-Trar, LLC. I'm here to conduct the preliminary asset inventory pursuant to Section 6 of your promissory note. My jaw tightened. Section 6. The right to audit the collateral at any time. Stellan wasn't just waiting for me to fail. He was actively managing his new property. I haven't missed a payment, I said. The first one isn't due for 3 days. This is just standard procedure, Lachlan said smoothly, tapping on his iPad. Mr. Hensley likes to know exactly what he's financing. I'm going to need to tag the hardware. I sat there and watched as this kid walked around my studio. The space I had dreamed of owning, the space I had sacrificed everything to get. He peeled a small silver barcode sticker off his sheet and slapped it right on the tempered glass side panel of my primary rendering tower. He scanned it with his iPad. He did the same to my dual monitors, my drawing tablet, and even the expensive ergonomic desk. Every time the iPad beeped, it felt like a nail being driven into my skull. You have a backup server? Lachlan asked, looking around. Under the desk, I muttered. He bent down, tagged it, and scanned it. Great. I also need you to authorize the transfer of your domain name and your portfolio hosting rights to our holding company. Just a formality to secure the digital assets. No, I said, standing up. The contract says he takes ownership if I default. I haven't defaulted. Lachlan smiled. It was a practiced corporate smile, completely devoid of empathy. The contract says the assets are held in escrow by S-Trar, LLC until the debt is satisfied. If you don't transfer the digital rights today, you're in breach of the agreement, which triggers immediate default. He held out the iPad. The domain registrar transfer page was already loaded. I looked at the screen. 10 years of my work. Every late night, every client, every particle simulation I had ever built. If I clicked approve, Stellan owned the keys to my entire professional identity. He could shut down my website tomorrow if he felt like it. I took the stylus from Lachlan's hand. I signed my name on the transfer authorization. Thank you, Lachlan said, taking the iPad back. Mr. Hensley also wanted me to pass along a message. Isabella's credit card minimums are due on the 15th, so he'd appreciate it if you made your payment via wire transfer instead of OC. OC takes too long to clear. He turned and walked out, the glass door shutting softly behind him. I stood in the middle of the room, looking at the silver barcode sticker on my computer. I was funding the woman who destroyed me. I was working 18 hours a day to pay for her brunch habits and her bad decisions, funneled through her brother's predatory holding company. I grabbed the cheap folding chair and threw it as hard as I could against the brick wall. It shattered, metal bending and plastic cracking loudly in the empty space. I couldn't do this for 3 years. I would snap. I would end up in a hospital or jail. I needed legal help. Real legal help, not internet research. I grabbed my keys and drove to a small strip mall on the edge of the city. There was a storefront law office squeezed between a dry cleaner and a discount liquor store. The sign on the window said Blythe and Associates Contract Law and Civil Litigation. Blythe was a woman I went to college with. We weren't close friends, but we had run in the same circles. She was sharp, cynical, and notoriously ruthless when it came to corporate bullying. She operated out of a strip mall because she hated big firm culture, not because she wasn't good. I walked in without an appointment. The receptionist looked annoyed, but Blythe happened to be walking out of her office to get coffee. She saw me, did a double take, and waved me back. Her office was a disaster of stacked case files and empty takeout containers. She sat behind her desk, pushed her glasses up her nose, and looked at me. Ryan Calloway. It's been a minute. You look awful. I need you to look at a contract, I said, pulling the printed pages of Stellan's promissory note out of my backpack. I laid it on her desk, and I need you to listen to something. I pulled out my phone and played the audio file. I watched her face as the 3 voices echoed in the small office. Stellan gloating, Isabella confirming the sabotage, Jasper demanding his payout. When the recording ended, Blythe didn't say anything. She picked up the contract and read through it in silence. She read fast, her eyes darting back and forth across the dense legal paragraph. She flipped to the signature page, looked at my digital signature, and sighed. She dropped the contract on the desk and leaned back. You signed this? She asked. I didn't have a choice. The medical startup canceled my contract. I was going to be bankrupt in 48 hours. Blythe rubbed her temples. Ryan, this isn't a loan. This is an indentured servitude agreement dressed up as venture debt. He's got cross-collateralization clauses in here that I've only seen in commercial shipping disputes. He owns your physical assets, your digital IP, and he has a lien on your future earning. If you try to declare bankruptcy, this debt survives because he classified it as a settlement of damages. What about the audio file? I asked, leaning forward. It proves fraud. It proves extortion. They conspired to ruin my business so Stellan could swoop in and buy me out. Where did you get the audio? She asked. An anonymous email. I think Jasper recorded it. Did you have consent to record? I wasn't in the room. I just received it. Blythe shook her head slowly. We are in a 2-party consent state, Ryan. It is a felony to record a private conversation without the consent of all parties involved. That audio file is illegally obtained wiretap material. If you try to introduce that in civil court, the judge will throw it out immediately. Worse, Stellan's lawyers will depose you, find out you don't know the origin of the recording, and they will press criminal charges against you for distributing it. So I have evidence of a crime, and I can't use it because the evidence itself is a crime? Welcome to the American legal system, she said dryly. Unless you can get Jasper Trask to sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the extortion plot and admitting he recorded the conversation, that audio file is legally toxic. And let's be real, a guy who took 20 grand to ruin your life isn't going to confess to a felony just to help you out. So what do I do? I asked, the desperation leaking into my voice. I can't pay him this money, Blythe. I'm doing Fiverr job just to make the first installment. I'm going to default by the end of the month. Blythe looked at me with genuine pity. It was worse than anger. Pity meant there was no strategy. You have 2 options, she said, leaning forward and resting her elbows on the desk. Option 1, you walk away. Right now. You hand him the keys to the studio, you let him take the hardware, you let him keep the domain name, you take the bankruptcy hit on your personal credit, and you go get a salaried job at an animation studio doing grunt work until the statute of limitations on this debt expires. I can't do that, I said instantly. That's my entire life's work. It's 10 years of portfolio building. Then you take option 2, she said quietly. You find leverage. I don't have leverage. They took it all. Everybody has a pressure point, Ryan. Stellan is an investment banker. He operates in a highly regulated industry. Men like that don't just commit casual extortion on a Tuesday unless they are entirely confident nobody is looking. You need to find out what he's hiding. You need to find a weakness that isn't protected by a 2-party consent law. She pushed the contract back across the desk toward me. I can't represent you on this, she said gently. If I go up against Estrar, LLC with an illegally obtained audio file as my only ammunition, Stellan will have my license suspended for ethical violation. I'm sorry, Ryan. You're on your own. I put the contract back in my bag. I thanked her for her time and walked out into the blinding afternoon sun. I drove to a branch of my bank downtown. I stood in line, my heart pounding in my throat, and I initiated the wire transfer for $4,200 to the account routing number Lachlan had provided. I watched the teller stamp the receipt. The money was gone. My account balance dropped to $314. I walked out of the bank. I was tired, a deep, bone-aching exhaustion that made the sidewalk feel unsteady under my feet. I decided to walk to a nearby coffee shop to get something cheap and caffeinated before driving back to the studio. I turned the corner onto Elm Street, an upscale retail block lined with boutique clothing stores and expensive cafes. I stopped. 30 feet ahead of me, stepping out of a high-end designer shoe store, was Isabella. She looked completely different from the woman who had stood crying in my studio 12 days ago. She was wearing a tailored linen dress, oversized sunglasses, and she was carrying 3 large shopping bags from stores I knew I couldn't afford to walk into. She looked radiant. She looked exactly like someone who had just received a massive injection of cash from her older brother to pay off her debts. She was walking toward me, looking down at her phone, typing rapidly with her thumbs. I didn't move. I stood in the middle of the sidewalk, letting the foot traffic part around me. She looked up when she was about 10 feet away. She stopped dead. The color drained from her face, then flooded back in an angry, defensive flush. She clutched her shopping bags tighter. For a second, I saw the old reflex, the urge to scream, to make a scene, to play the victim, but she didn't. She remembered who held the cards now. She pushed her sunglasses up into her hair and gave me a slow, condescending smile. Ryan, she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. I didn't expect to see you out of the office. I thought you'd be chained to your desk, rendering cartoons for Stellan. I looked at the shopping bag. He pays you well for setting the trap. Her smile tightened. I don't know what you're talking about. Stellan just gave me an advance on my trust fund. It's family money. I heard the recording, Isabella, I said quietly. The smile vanished completely. Her eyes darted left and right, checking the people walking past us, making sure nobody was listening. I don't care what you heard, she hissed, stepping closer. Dropping the volume volume of her voice to a venomous whisper. You deserved it. You humiliated me in front of my family. You threw my things out like garbage. You thought you could just upgrade your life and leave me behind. Now you work for us. She took a step back, adjusting her grip on her bag. The smugness returned to her face. Make sure you hit that next milestone, Ryan, she said, turning to walk away. I have a trip to Tulum booked for next month, and Stellan promised he'd cover the flights if the LLC performs well. I watched her walk down the street, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. I didn't yell after her. I didn't feel the urge to throw anything. The panic and the desperation that had been suffocating me for 2 weeks suddenly crystallized into something else entirely. Something cold, precise, and completely still. Blythe had told me to find leverage. She told me Stellan operated in a highly regulated industry. I turned around and walked back to my car. I didn't drive to the studio. I drove to the public library. I sat down at a public terminal, ignoring the smell of stale carpet and old paper. I pulled up a fresh browser window and typed in Estrar LLC. I knew from basic corporate structure that LLCs used to hold debt were rarely isolated. They were usually nested inside larger holding companies to obscure the paper trail. I spent 4 hours digging through public state registry databases. I pulled in corporation documents, paid the nominal fees using my rapidly dwindling debit card, and cross-referenced the name. Estrar LLC wasn't registered to Stellan Hensley. It was registered to a registered agent service in Delaware. But the initial funding filings for the LLC had a required signature from a managing director. The name wasn't Stellan. It was Coralie Vance, the lead project manager at the medical tech startup. The woman who had looked at me with supreme disappointment on the Zoom call and told me they were terminating my contract for ethical violation. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my tired eyes. Stellan didn't just capitalize on my failure. He engineered it from the inside. He knew Coralie. They were in business together. Coralie killed my massive medical contract, plunging me into financial ruin, and then Stellan swooped in to buy my debt on the exact same day. Estrar LLC wasn't just a holding company for my debt. It was a joint venture between Stellan and the person who controlled my biggest client. If the medical tech startup's board of directors or the EFTA compliance officers knew their lead project manager was secretly partnering with an investment banker to intentionally bankrupt vendors and seize their intellectual property through predatory loan, the entire Series B funding round would instantly collapse. It was a massive conflict of interest. It was corporate fraud. I sat back in the hard plastic library chair. I didn't just have a pressure point. I had a stick of dynamite. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. This is Coralie Vance. Stellan informed me you made the first payment. I need the raw source files for the fluid dynamics simulations you completed before your termination. Upload them to the Estrar LLC server by midnight tonight. Do not make me ask twice. I read the text again. Then I started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the dry, ragged sound of a guy who had just found the structural flaw in the prison he was locked inside. I knew exactly why Coralie was demanding the raw source files. Fluid dynamics in medical tech isn't just about making a pretty video. It's a complex mathematical simulation. The startup needed the raw project files, the node trees, the particle emission rates, the actual baked math to prove to their Series B investors and the EFTA that the surgical stent actually worked the way the animation depicted. They only had my rendered video files. Coralie had been in such a rush to execute Stellan and Isabella's trap. She had fired me before securing the actual intellectual property the startup needed to survive. And now she was panicking. She had a deadline, probably a massive investor pitch tomorrow morning, and she had nothing to show them but a video file she didn't own the math to. In her desperation, she had texted me from her personal phone, the exact same number she had used to call me for project updates 2 weeks ago. And she had explicitly, in writing, tied herself to Estrar LLC. She got greedy, and she got sloppy. I didn't reply to her text. I closed my phone, grabbed my backpack, and drove straight back to my studio. I unlocked the glass door, walked past the shattered remains of the folding chair, and booted up my workstation. The silver barcode sticker Lachlan had slapped on the glass panel caught the light. I ignored it. I opened my email client. I created a new message. In the tow field, I put Thad Hensley, the general counsel who had sat in his glass office and lectured me about ethics. I CC'd Emerson in compliance, and I CC'd Stellan. The subject line was simple, urgent, Series B investor disclosure vendor fraud, and Estrar LLC. I kept the body of the email strictly professional. I didn't mention Isabella. I didn't mention my past with Jasper. I just laid out the facts. I attached a high-resolution screenshot of Coralie's text message. I attached the PDF of the Delaware Incorporation documents showing Coralie Vance as the managing director of Estrar LLC. Thad, I typed. It appears your compliance department missed a crucial detail during your ethics investigation. Your lead project manager, Coralie Vance, in partnership with an outside investment banker, intentionally terminated my contract to force me into financial distress. They immediately purchased my debt through a shadow LLC they co-own. Coralie is now using her position at your company to extort the raw FDA required simulation files from me for free, masking it as a debt collection. I took a breath, letting my hands hover over the keyboard. Then I typed the final paragraph. I am withholding the raw simulation files. If my promissory note with Estrar LLC is not legally dissolved, my digital assets returned, and my original contract paid in full by 8 Nakapo AM tomorrow, this email and its attachments will be forwarded to the SEC and every institutional investor listed on your Series B funding sheet. Let me know how you'd like to proceed. I hit send. It was 6:15 p.m. I sat back in my chair. The studio was incredibly quiet. The hum of the dual GPU setup was the only sound in the room. I didn't know if this was going to work. Stellan was a shark. He might have a countermove I couldn't see. But I knew one thing for sure. Men like Stellan and Thad Hensley lived and died by institutional reputation. They didn't do messy. They didn't do public scandals. At 6:42 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID said Stellan. I let it ring 3 times before I picked it up. Hello, Stellan. She texted you, Stellan said. His voice wasn't smooth or amused anymore. It was tight, clipped, vibrating with barely contained rage. Not at me, at Coralie. She texted me. I confirmed. From her personal number. She was very demanding. I heard a heavy exhale on the other end of the line. I told her to wait until Friday. I told her we had you boxed in. But she had a pitch deck due for the venture capital guys tomorrow at 9, and she realized realized she didn't have the proprietary files. Idiotic. So you're admitting S-Tar LLC is a front to steal vendor IP? I'm not admitting anything on an unrecorded line, Stellan snapped. I'm a banker, Ryan. I take calculated risks. Corley brought me a distressed asset, and I finance the acquisition. But I don't underwrite stupidity. And leaving a digital paper trail tying a startup's PM to a predatory holding company right before a Series B round is terminal stupidity. Thad Hensley seemed to agree, I said. Thad just called me, Stellan said, his voice dropping into a harsh monotone. He is absolutely livid. He's pulling Corley into his office right now. She's going to be fired by the end of the hour, and they are preparing to offer her up to the SEC to protect the funding round. That sounds like a Corley problem. What about my problem, Stellan? There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of traffic behind him. He was pacing somewhere. You've proven to be more trouble than you're worth, Ryan, Stellan finally said. I'm voiding the promissory note. S-Tar LLC releases all claims on your physical hardware, your domain, and your future earnings. Lachlan will email you the formal dissolution documents in 5 minutes. Sign them, and we are permanently uncoupled. The sheer weight of the relief almost made my knees buckle, but I kept my voice perfectly steady. And the digital assets? Thad wants the source files, Stellan said. The startup still needs the math for the FDA. He is going to email you a direct purchase order. $70,000. That covers your original remaining contract balance, plus a premium for the inconvenience. You send him the files tonight, the money wires tomorrow morning, and you sign a non-disclosure agreement stating you will never speak of Corley Vance or S-Tar LLC again. It was a clean break. The cage door was swinging wide open, and they were handing me a check on the way out. Deal, I said. There's one more thing, Stellan said. The business edge faded from his voice, replaced by something colder, something deeply familial and deeply exhausted. Isabella, I waited. She came to me with this whole plot, Stellan said quietly. She told me Jasper was a loose thread we could pull. She wanted you ruined. I humored her because it looked like a profitable side venture. But her little revenge fantasy almost cost me my banking license today. She likes to blow things up when she doesn't get her way, I said. I warned you about that at the steakhouse. You did, Stellan agreed. I'm cutting her off, Ryan. Completely. Her credit cards are canceled. Her trust allowance is frozen. I am putting her on a train to our parents' house in Connecticut tomorrow morning, and she is going to live in their guest room until she figures out how to be an adult. You won't hear from her again. I guarantee it. Have a good evening, Stellan. Don't ever contact me again, Ryan. The line went dead. I put the phone down on the desk. 4 minutes later, an email arrived from Lachlan. It contained the legal release of the promissory note. The cross-collateralization clauses were struck through. The lien was dissolved. I signed it digitally and sent it back. 2 minutes after that, an email arrived from Thad Hensley. It was a sterile, corporate purchase order for the fluid dynamic source files. $70,000, payable upon receipt of the data. No mention of ethic, no mention of Jasper, no mention of Corley. Just business. I zipped the raw project folders into a secure archive. I uploaded them to the startup's secure server. I replied to Thad's email with the download link and a PDF of my final invoice. Then, I closed my email client. I stood up from the desk. My back ached, and my eyes were burning from 12 days of stress and cheap monitor glare. I walked over to the tempered glass side panel of my workstation. I dug my fingernail under the edge of the silver barcode sticker Lachlan had placed there. I peeled it back. It left a little bit of sticky residue on the glass, but I wiped it away with my thumb. I rolled the sticker into a tiny ball and threw it in the trash can. The studio belonged to me again. The hardware belonged to me. My name belonged to me. I walked over to the back wall. The white paint I had rolled on 2 weeks ago was completely dry, perfectly smooth and matte. It looked good. I didn't have any clients lined up for tomorrow. I didn't have a schedule. But for the first time in 4 years, there were no threats hanging in the air. There was no loaded gun on the coffee table. I turned off the overhead light. I locked the glass door behind me. I walked out into the warm evening air, got into my car, and drove home in complete, uninterrupted silence.